For a brief moment in 1221, the most feared army on earth looked beatable. That moment happened at Parwan, where Jalal al-Din Mangburni did something almost no one believed was possible during Genghis Khan's lifetime. He defeated a major Mongol field force. That is why this battle still matters. Not because it destroyed the Mongol Empire. It did not. It matters because it shattered the feeling that the Mongols could not lose at all. And then, almost immediately, history turned that victory into a tragedy. The simple version of the title says, "This was the only battle Genghis Khan's army ever lost." That line is dramatic and not perfectly precise in every tiny detail of steppe warfare, because the Mongols did suffer smaller setbacks and disputed reverses. But Parwan is widely remembered as the most important field defeat suffered by a major Mongol force during Genghis Khan's western campaign. Its psychological effect was huge, even though its strategic effect was short. To understand why Parwan mattered, you have to start with disaster. The Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire began after a diplomatic and commercial crisis linked to the massacre of a Mongol trade mission, and later the killing of envoys. For Genghis Khan, that was not a small insult. It became a casus belli, a reason for war that would be answered with devastating force. The invasion that followed smashed city after city. The Khwarazm Shah, Muhammad II, fled and later died. What remained of serious resistance slowly centered on his son, Jalal al-Din Mangburni, who proved far more energetic and capable than his father in the final struggle. That point matters because resistance to the Mongols was not just about troops. It was about morale. The Mongols terrified enemies before battle even began. Cities surrendered because resistance looked useless. A visible victory against a Mongol army could therefore do more than win ground. It could break fear. Jalal al-Din tried to build that possibility in the Afghan region. He gathered remnants of Khwarazmian troops, local fighters, and commanders who still believed the conquerors could be resisted. This was not a comfortable army. It was a coalition formed in catastrophe. But catastrophe can harden will when surrender looks even worse than risk. Near the region north of Kabul, at Parwan, Jalal al-Din faced a Mongol force commonly linked in Persian sources to the commander Shiji Kutuk. Exact troop numbers are uncertain and vary widely across the sources, which is normal for medieval warfare. Some retellings make the Mongols badly outnumbered. Others suggest something closer to balance. The safer approach is not to worship the numbers. It is to examine the tactical problem. The Mongols were masters of mobility, mounted archery, discipline, coordination, feigned retreat, and operational speed. If you fought them on their terms, you often died on their terms too. So Jalal al-Din needed something more than courage. He needed a battlefield and a plan that reduced the Mongols' favorite strengths. Chroniclers describe Parwan as taking place in restricted ground where Mongol maneuver mattered less than usual. That alone would have changed the fight. A fast horse archer army loses some magic when space narrows and movement options shrink. Some traditions say Jalal al-Din had parts of his force fight dismounted for part of the battle, which would preserve horses and reduce vulnerability to certain mounted tactics. Other stories mention deceptive use of spare mounts or visual tricks in the line. The exact details differ. The central truth does not. Jalal al-Din refused to give the Mongols the exact battlefield they wanted. That decision was the first crack in the myth. The battle is often described as lasting 2 days. That length matters. It means Jalal al-Din's army did not simply land one lucky blow. It held together under pressure, absorbed repeated attacks, and then counterattacked effectively enough to break a Mongol force in the field. For an army facing the Mongols in 1221, cohesion was everything. Panic usually destroyed opponents before any clever plan could save them. At Parwan, Jalal al-Din's men did not break. The Mongol force under Shiji Kutuk did. News of the defeat spread fast. That was almost as important as the casualties themselves. In lands already terrified by the speed and brutality of the Mongol advance, the idea that a Muslim ruler had beaten a Mongol army was electric. Some towns rose in renewed resistance. People who had accepted defeat as destiny briefly saw another possibility. That tells you something vital about Mongol power. It rested not only on battlefield excellence, but also on the political force of fear. Parwan wounded that fear. So why did Jalal al-Din succeed where so many others failed? First, he was a capable battlefield commander. Second, the terrain likely limited Mongol mobility. Third, his troops were fighting under extreme pressure, and armies fighting for survival can show unusual resilience. Fourth, the Mongols were extraordinary but not supernatural. Their system depended on intelligence, space, discipline, and timing. If those were disrupted by terrain and a competent enemy, defeat became possible. That is one of the great lessons of Parwan. It reminds us not to turn military excellence into magic. Even the strongest system can be hurt if the right conditions line up against it. But then comes the tragedy. The battle did not change the war. The immediate reason seems painfully human. Jalal al-Din's coalition fractured after victory. Sources describe arguments among commanders over booty, including disputes centered on horses and spoils. The exact story may vary in detail, but the pattern is familiar. A desperate alliance wins the impossible fight and then starts tearing itself apart over reward, rank, and trust. Men departed. Cohesion dissolved. The opening created at Parwan narrowed almost as soon as it appeared. That makes the battle feel strangely modern. Victory in battle means little if politics breaks the coalition behind it. Genghis Khan understood the danger at once. He did not dismiss Parwan as a minor embarrassment. He moved personally against Jalal al-Din. That response tells you how seriously he took the threat. Jalal al-Din was not just a surviving enemy. He had become a symbol. A symbol that said the Mongols could bleed. Later in 1221, Genghis caught him at the Indus. There, Jalal al-Din was defeated, although later memory admired his ferocity and escape. So the victory at Parwan became not the beginning of Mongol collapse, but the prelude to a doomed final resistance. That is why the battle carries both triumph and sadness. Parwan also reveals the Mongol system at its limits. Mongol warfare was built on logistics, intelligence, communication, flexible command, and brutal discipline. When those pieces aligned, the result was devastating. But Parwan showed what happened when mobility was constrained, fear was resisted, and an enemy refused to play the expected role. The Mongols could still lose a real battlefield contest. It was rare because so few enemies could create all those conditions at once. The battle matters in another way too. In Persian and later Islamic memory, Parwan was not just a military event. It became a moral moment during civilizational trauma. Writers living through the Mongol storm naturally remembered the ruler who showed that the conquerors were not made of iron and destiny alone. That symbolic value can sometimes make heroic stories grow larger than the strategic facts. Historians should be careful about that. Jalal al-Din was brave and effective, but he did not rebuild the Khwarazmian state. His later career was unstable and ultimately unsuccessful. Parwan did not trigger a lasting anti-Mongol recovery. The Mongol war machine remained overwhelmingly stronger at the strategic level. What Jalal al-Din won was a battle, a legend, and a short-lived opening. He did not win the war. That is exactly why the story endures. It captures one of history's cruelest truths. Breaking invincibility once is not the same as changing the whole system that created it. A battlefield victory can be real, brilliant, and unforgettable, yet still vanish under political fragmentation, weak resources, and the personal return of a superior enemy commander. For documentary storytelling, Parwan works because it is both proof and warning. It proves the Mongols were not unbeatable. It warns that courage and tactical brilliance still need unity after the battle ends. Jalal al-Din achieved what looked impossible. Then human weakness inside his own camp helped waste the only opening he had created. That may be the saddest part of all. Not that the Mongols were too strong to ever lose, but that the men who proved they could be beaten could not stay together long enough to turn that proof into history. If you want the next story where one unforgettable stand changes memory even when it fails to change the whole war, watch the next video now.